I didn't know it because our parents or grandparents never told us, but they had seen this hairy monster. As soon as we made eye contact, it just took off on all fours to beat the band. Yeah, I'm Shane Spencer, originally from Richland County, Ohio, and moved down to Coshocton. It's going on, I believe 6-7 years. The reason I got into Bigfooting was my first sighting was with me and my sister at Richland County at the age of 9 or 10, and at my aunt's house there in Richland County. That's basically what got me my interest, but actually what got me into Bigfoot research is when I moved down to Coshocton. I mean, I've always looked for tracks and watched the documentaries, the movies, but I got with David Wickham, and it was sort of weird how we met up. I had a cutout billboard that I made of a Bigfoot. Mike knows about that because he about wrecked his car when he seen it along the road. I had red glowing eyes. I had it like 10 feet from the road, and when you come up around that curve at night, you run right into them red glowing eyes and this big 8-foot creature that was actually plywood. So David had left me one of his business cards there at the actually at the neighbors, because he thought I lived across the road, but I was actually up at the cabin a good ways from the road. And so Linda, my neighbor, come over and said, "Shane, I think this is your card." It was a Bigfoot card, you know, to contact David Wickham if you had an encounter or an experience. So anyway, me and David sort of met that way. I called him once I got the card, and we become friends, and he was into the Bigfoot thing. And, you know, I knew to look for tracks and things, but I didn't really know what TP structures were, or arches, or the X's, or, you know, not too familiar with a lot of the vocals, although I've heard some of them in the past, but I've never, you know, chalked it up that could be a possible Bigfoot. But as time went on, I guess I could tell you about my first sighting in Coshocton County. And
tell me about this first sighting with your sister. Where was that, and what happened? What did you see?
Well, that was in Richland County. Pretty much we was in the sandbox on a summer day, and I don't know what month it was. Like I said, this has been 40-some years ago. So this thing, I didn't know it because our parents or grandparents never told us, but they had seen this hairy monster running around the property, you know, for quite some time. But, you know, as a child, 9 or 10 years old, you know, they're not going to tell you the kids that, scare them. But we was at the sandbox in the backyard, and there's an old outhouse there. And, you know, most outhouses are 7.5 foot high. And this thing come out from behind it and stood beside it. And it was as tall as the outhouse was. And, you know, most outhouses are 7.5 feet. And of course they got the half moon on the door, throw that in there. But it came out and stood beside the outhouse and was just, you know, staring at us. And the best of my recollection, I mean, we took off running, you know, what else would kids do 9 or 10 years old? And the best of my recollection, it wasn't a Hulk-like figure. It was more of a lanky Bigfoot, I guess you could call it. It had long brown hair. I remember that. I remember the piercing eyes. You know, just a classic. This was more of a lanky Bigfoot. You know, it wasn't a 4 foot wide, broad shoulders. It was more of a lanky squatch. But that's what we had saw, and my sister to this day, she remembers it vividly, just like I did. But I know it, my aunt, my grandma had seen it numerous times around the property throughout the years. You know, not an everyday thing, but, you know, every once in a while they would see it, you know, pass through the property or whatever, and they knew it was there. So basically that was my first sighting, and combined with watching Leonard Nimoy in search of Bigfoot really got me, you know, an interest in Bigfoot. But like I said, till I moved down to Coshocton County, I really didn't know what to look for in the woods rather than tracks. It was, you know, the TP structures, the arches, the X's. You know, I've never paid attention to them before like I do now. So, but us moving down here, I got the date here. I got to write dates down. The road crossing happened, and it was on the Coshocton County, Knox County line on 541. That happened in 2018. It was about December, right around there. I knew it was deer season, gun season here in Ohio. We was driving to Bladensburg, and it was probably around, we was headed to church, so church started at 7, so about 6:30 we was right there on 541 where this monster ran in front of us. And I remember what Bilbo said from Finding Bigfoot, or Bobo. He said they're all not rocket scientists, because if he was a rocket scientist, was very smart, he wouldn't have ran out and we just about hit him. But there was no traffic. We had our bright lights on. Speed limit's 55. We was doing 45 because there were so many deer along the side of the road. We was just taking our time. And this thing just came out, a Hulk figure, 8 or 9 foot tall, and just crossed the road in front of us. Another second, we would have totaled our car with it. But the wife looked over at me as like, did you see that? Well, yeah, we about hit it. And it wasn't a guy in a Gillo suit. It was my guess, and I could be off a couple 100 pounds, with 700 to 800 pounds. If you would go to a zoo and see a silverback gorilla, just double that height and size. It was huge. You could actually see as it ran off from left to right on the edge of the woods. You know how your headlights would catch the side view. You could actually see its butt as it was running down the trail, and there's woods on both sides of the roads. So it must have had a good hiding place. Then once the hunters got out of the woods, it took off to go feed somewhere or something. But why it didn't stop and cross the road, instead of just running right across the road, beats me. But I don't know. But that was the sighting that we had here in Coshocton County, one of them that we had together, which was really good because of the 4 sightings. I had 2 witnesses with me that's, was seeing the same thing. So,
well, tell me about some of the others.
Well, there was one back in, let me look at the date on that. And you got to understand, I've been out in the woods for years. I mean, they actually called me Wild Bill when I was growing up. I was just always loved the woods. I've always been hunting and fishing. And when I say love the woods, I'm in the woods 3 or 4 days a week during the warmer weather. And I put miles and miles and miles on reconning areas or hiking or looking for evidence. So it's very seldom you're going to find anything that you can say, yeah, that's potentially Bigfoot evidence, but you put in your miles and eventually it'll pay off. But that would have been in 2021. I was it was right in end of September, beginning of October. The property that I got runs almost about 3/4 of a mile long, and most of it's woods that I own. And I drove my quad back clear to the back end from the house. And there's a little creek down there at the bottom, and I parked down there. Then I climb up a ridge, and I had a ground blind. So, as I'm driving the quad back through there and park, it's noisy. It's going to scare everything out. So I went up quietly to the ground blind. I'm just, it's a bright 70-degree day and just a beautiful day. And I'm just being real quiet in case a buck. I am not thinking Bigfoot at all. I'm just thinking maybe a buck could come in. So I'm just being real quiet. This has been a half hour after I parked the quad. So by then the woods has settled down. And I hear, as I'm leaning down, I think I was putting a stake in or a tie down on the ground blind, I hear a crack sound. Well, when the woods is perfectly quiet and you hear something like that, your heads and eyes are going to turn right to where you heard that sound. And I remember distinctively when I looked, I seen a stretched out, dark colored arm. I would say black, but it could have been a brown or dark brown on a dead tree, probably 6 inches in diameter. And I'm probably Oh, from ridge, there's a low gully to another ridge, maybe 60, 70 yards, 50 to 70 yards, we'll say. And this is big trees, so I can see pretty good from one ridge to the other. And where the other ridge is, it's sort of on the property of me and my neighbor. And his is sort of brushy, so this had to come out of that brushy area. Like I said, when I turned my head and looked, its arm was on that tree and it pushed that dead tree over. I mean, it was a 6-inch dead tree. I mean, I probably could have pushed it over. It just cracked it and popped off and left about 5 feet of it standing. And there was a few leaves, so I didn't see the complete thing, but I could see the legs, its head, and its arm. But there was, some leaves blocking some of the body. And I was just looking at amazement, and it started walking on through the thick brush. I could see it through the leaves and the brush, distinctly that it wasn't a bear. It was walking on two legs, because I could see at times the legs moving, the arms swing, and the big dome head. It wasn't the neighbor. The neighbor's never there. They don't even have a house on the 200 and some acres. Then behind me is 160 acres with nobody on it. Then another 200 acres to the right of me with nobody on it. So I'm in a really remote area, and Woodbury Wildlife is behind all that. So you can go back there, and we got about a half-mile driveway. The only time you see anybody is once a day, except on Sundays, and that's the mailman or mail lady. So we're really remote. But I was in amazement. Then it went up through the brush, and I didn't see it no more once I got in the brush. So I waited about 10 minutes, and I went up to where I had seen it. Then I seen the tree where it had broke it off and went through the brush, but the ground wasn't conducive to find any tracks, as it was on a ridge. Most of the time, if you find any tracks, it's going to be down in the swells or the bottoms. So I didn't find any tracks. So I started walking towards where the last place that I seen it, and I heard something jump up out of the brush. I never seen it. It could have been a deer. I can't say it was that figure that I seen, but the brush just busted up maybe 30, 40 yards in front of me at the bottom of the ravine. I mean, it's pretty brushy down there. And like I said, I never seen it. I couldn't tell what it was, but it could have been possibly that thing that I had seen. But yeah, that was very, very convincing. Like I said, this thing was tall, black, and the Amish neighbors are real respectful to each other, and we don't go on each other's property unless we call. He's got permission, I got permission, but we always, out of respect, call each other or text each other. And he would never. They've never been once over. So it wasn't a human. I was close enough to see that it was all one color, so it ruled out a human anyway. But that was pretty much the extent of that sighting. As far as anything else going on the property, I have got a couple casts. One was about 13 inches, I'm thinking. Toes, everything was on it. And that's another day that I took the grandkids to the creek back in the backwoods, because they like looking for crawdads, salamanders, frogs. And as we're walking that ravine, I said I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. I just had the grandkids out. Ran across that track in the mud, and it was the most perfect track you want to see. I mean, it had the toes, the width for only being 13 inches. But, all Bigfoots ain't 16, 18-inch tracks. There's going to be little ones. So, and nobody's going to be walking back, 3/4 of a mile back in there and nothing around barefooted, And so I ended up casting it the next day, and which I was glad that I had got that cast. But I've got a sore throat, so you guys excuse me.
Oh, that's fine.
Seems like this time of the year.
For sure.
But my wife has heard things. There was one funny thing that happened. I believe it was last year, might have been the year before. There's a creek that runs up in front of the property, and there was a log that was like an old part of a telephone pole, but the end was hollowed out and it rolled it into the creek. It's about a 4-foot drop off. And my wife was with me in the yard there, and I said, well, you wait up here. I'm going to jump down that creek. It's really a dry creek bed unless it rains. And so I'll throw it back up there. I had actually hit it with the lawnmower a couple of days ago and rolled it off into the creek. So I got down in there, and as I picked it up, the end was hollow. And there must have been 100 bumblebees with a bumblebee nest, which I didn't know they could make nests, down in the end of that log. So I got that right up, lifted up, got right by my face, and I'm seeing that. And I look at my wife like this, and I say, run. So she looks at me funny, and she knows, she takes off. And well, we get together after I throw the log down, and she said, did you hear that? I said, what are you talking about? She said, I heard a big roar up on the back hill. I said, that's why I wasn't yelling run about that. I was yelling run because these bumblebees were right here in my face coming out of this log. So I never got to hear that, but she did. Then my daughter was bow hunting. Well, I should back up because she would actually lived in Fredericktown, which is Fredericktown is Knox County, but she had a Richland County address, so she was actually in Richland County. And she would come down to my place in Coshocton and deer hunt. She would drive down there, and she came, I don't know, about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and usually she would leave, right at dark, come back to the house when shooting light was over. And David Wickham happened to be there at the house, and we was going over Bigfoot stuff, and my daughter came in like 45 minutes early before dark, and I didn't think nothing to ask her why, because I was in conversation with David, and she left, and I guess she had told her mom that I heard something in the woods. She said, I heard some roar, scream like type sounds in the woods with some wood knocks. So I call her up after she got home. She's had an hour drive to come down to our place. I call her up and say, Shayna, yeah, what'd you hear? She says, Dad, I don't know what it was. She said, I just heard this scream 4 or 5 times, then these loud wood knocks. I said, really? I said, well, go on the internet and pull up a bobcat scream. She said, okay. So she did that, called me back and said, no, it wasn't that. I said, pull up a hawk or an owl. I forget what I told her, and screech, something like that. She said, no, it wasn't that. And I know we don't have wild hogs in there, and she knows what hogs sound like because we had a farm for 17 years. So I said, go to one of the Bigfoot sites and just pull up a Bigfoot scream, howl, roar type. I forget what I had told her. And 10 minutes later, she calls me back and she says, Dad, that was it. That's what I heard. And I was convinced she heard something because of the wood knock. She said afterwards, she said it was all going off in different places of the woods. So after that, she wouldn't hunt by herself. When she would come down, I'd have to go with her, or at least within 100 feet of her before she would go hunting. And still to this day, she won't go back in our woods. We actually moved to another place with even more woods. She won't go by herself and just deer hunt in the back. I have to be there within a couple hundred feet at the most. But yeah, so we have had some strange encounters down here at Coshocton County.
Do you know of other people that have also seen something in that county?
Yeah, well, Mike here has. He had his sighting in, what was that, 2021? Yeah, he had his sighting at Woodbury at 2021. I had one more sighting. That would have been 2022 was the most recent. And that one was probably the most, I was going to say sketchy, but it was the most rattling one that I've ever had, probably. And probably the reason why, because I was so far back in. I was back in off of this main state route almost a mile than where I park at. I walked in probably half to three-quarters of a mile, somewhere in that range. I'm up filming, I got the camera, here's some red berries, potential food source. I'm going a Bigfoot hike, recon, looking for tracks, arches, anything to do with Bigfoot. And just going handing with the camera. Then I stopped and I said, I got a weird feeling that something's watching me. And I told my buddy, he wasn't with me, but after I got back home, I told him, I said, you would think I staged this thing because you're panning the camera and you say, all of a sudden, I got a weird feeling. But if you compare that to like when you're at a red light and you feel like somebody's watching you and you look over and they're looking at you, or you're in the woods and say, what in the world's watching me? And you got a deer right behind you and you turn around, there's a deer looking at you. So that's the type of feeling I had. And as soon as I panned the camera around, I never did get nothing on film because where the pond was and the briars, I would have needed to bring my camera up like this. But when I turned around and I seen this black figure on the other side of the pond, it was on all fours, remind me of a huge gorilla. And as soon as we made eye contact, it just took off on all fours, to beat the band. And I got a really good look at it the first 50, 75 feet as it ran diagonal up the hill. There was a little flat area before it got up the hill. And these things can run like a cheetah. If you wanted to try to outrun one with the one I seen, you don't have no chance. Your best bet's probably to play dead like a bear. But I had seen it run up there, and I'm in like shock, because I'm back by myself, and I just can't believe that I got this strange feeling. I turned the camera around, and there it is. And after I calmed down for about 10 minutes, I said, Shane, you got to do this for science. That's one of my sayings. You got to do this for science. You got to work your way over the other side of the pond. Now, this just ain't a grassy knoll around a pond. It's briars and dips and just all kinds of things. It's tough to get around to the other side. So it took me probably 15, 20 minutes to get to the other side of the pond. And the reason I had to, because I had to look for tracks. With what I seen, I wanted to verify that, hey, this ain't no bear. So I got over there and I'm looking, I'm seeing like scuff marks. They're not feet, but it's like something, when this thing was running, it had a locomotion like this, and its head was, a bear, his head is relatively small compared to the size of its body. But this thing was the opposite. Its head was relatively large compared to its body. And it had a tilt like this, that the front end was higher than the back end. And so once I got over there, after about 10 minutes, I sat down by the tree trying to digest all what was going on. And there's like a finger ridge behind it. It's got three little points. I said, well, I got to go up each one and see which way it went. Because once it got up the hill with the foliage, I didn't know which way it went at the top of the hill. I didn't see it then. Well, as I was going to the first one, I noticed a track, and it was 16 inches with toes in it, and it was going the opposite way of where it ran. So that told me right there that it came in from this way, was down by the pond, eating frogs, fish. I don't know what it was eating. I have no idea if it was even eating. And once we seen each other, it ran the way it came. So I go up the first finger, and once I get to the top, there's brush so thick, if something would have ran through it, you would have seen a trail. Well, there wasn't nothing there. So I backed up, maybe 40, 50 feet high, then went to the second one. Nothing there. Same thing, briars. And so back down it, went to the third one, and with all the deer tracks, it was hard to tell, but I figured it had to go up this way because I'd have seen it busting through the brush, you'd have seen the trail. So I started going up that way, and the rankest smell is like a putrid, sulfur, wet dog, dead animal smell. I mean, I've heard people say to make your eyes water. It was bad, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was pretty strong. And it was like a on and off rain that day, like a mist, July day. It happened in July. And the wind was coming right towards me. So I kept on following this smell. It would come and go. And at times it got really, really strong. And so what this thing it did, it had circled the pond where I seen it at and come back around to where I come on the main trail where I first entered at. So it was backtracking to the way to where I came in. And how I knew this, because it was an 45 minutes to an hour from the time I had my sighting, the time I got over to the other side of the pond, then I sat down for 10 minutes or so, then I had to go up them finger ridges. So that smell was still there. With the wind blowing, it shouldn't have been there. So this thing, I compare it to like if you look at your house and you look out your back window and you see a stranger in your backyard, you're not going to take your eyes off of him. You're going to want to know where he's at all times, what their intentions are. And that's sort of not the feeling that I had, but as I was processing it, that's why this thing stuck around. It should have been long gone because it wanted to know where I was at. Whether I was friend or foe or I had other people with me, it didn't know because I surprised it there at the pond. But as I circled the pond and kept running to the smell, I found a skid mark, and it was fresh, going down the hillside where the moss and the leaves and dirt had all been freshly, something slid down that hill. Then it must have crossed the path where I came in at. And that pretty much ended my hike. I didn't leave because I was afraid, but I had no idea where it went. Once it crossed the path, I couldn't pick up on it. It was just so thick. And so I had a lot to process when I got home from that one. But the things that led to me that it wasn't a bear was the smell, because I've never heard of any reports of a bear having a sulfur, a putrid smell to it, and leaving a 16-inch track with toes, not claws, but toes. So unfortunately, I had one of them cheap Walmart phones with the built-in SD card. My phone blacked out, and I lost everything on that from the handprints, the foot tracks. So that was the story on that one. That's pretty much all the sightings I've had. There's been some other possible times that we've seen eye shine that could have been a Bigfoot. I know Mike had caught one last year. I'm sure he'll tell you about it sometime, about the eye shine. That we verified that was what, 8.5 feet up. Yeah, we went back. What we do if we run across something on film or a picture, we'll go back the next day or next couple of days and do a recreation. That involves having a 10-foot pole on 1 foot increments and a cutout of a Bigfoot, like from here up. And you'll go back to where you filmed this or got it on night vision, I should say. And you got to line up the trees and the branches where you were standing. Then the other person goes and holds the billboard up, and you gauge it by the limbs and the branches. Say, no, a little higher, right there. And David Wickham was with us on that one, and he told me and Mike, said, there wasn't an owl sitting in a tree, because where that tree is, there's no limbs. And this thing, if I remember right, was ducking in and out to the right and left of that tree. Mike, was that how it was? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was 2 big yellow eyes that was ducking in and out that Mike had caught as we was walking down the lane there on night vision. So we've had things happen like that. We had a great whoop that was back in October at Woodbury. It was one of them classic, just whoop, just perfect. We did a fist bump on it and everything, and I had my $30 audio recorder. I said, yeah, I got it. Well, by the time we cleaned it up, it went from a 9 to a 1. It barely could hear it. But what we heard with our ears was, a definitive whoop. And there's no other animal in Ohio that actually makes that whoop sound. So yeah, that was pretty awesome getting that one.
Well, you've had a lot of experience both in vocals and scene and just a lot of encounters actually. So, from your point of view, what do you think these things are?
I There's a lot of theories, a lot of opinions. A lot of people think they're a primate, which I don't. I don't think no way, shape, or form they're a primate. I mean, yeah, they might share some of the same attributes, but I'm not a gorilla, and and we share some of the attributes, that of each other. But I'm not a gorilla. Well, they say 99% DNA. I say hogwash. I don't look nothing like a gorilla. I might act like one sometimes, but yeah. So I'm thinking more of just an undiscovered separate species that's flesh and blood. I don't believe aliens dropped them off, or I just deal with flesh and blood animal because that's what I know. That's what I've seen. Flesh and blood animals leave tracks. Flesh and blood animals have smells to them. They have vocals. So I stick with the flesh and blood. Now there is researchers that do the paranormal, and that's great because there is a side to that that needs to be, it needs to be studied. And as far as people seeing orbs or portals or whatever, that's actually fine that they're doing. Then the other aspect is people like you that do the podcast. So eyewitness accounts get out there, and that's a credible piece of evidence, that people are actually seeing something. So if you combine all them together in the pot, then you can make your pancakes, so to speak. But anyway,
It's true. There's a lot of information coming out these days too.
yeah, it ain't the mainstream, and it didn't used to be the mainstream 15 years ago, but now it's more and more. There's so many groups out there, and uh, TV shows, YouTube. It's really went mainstream. It's the excitement of the unknown. The millions and millions of acres of woods out there, and just the stories that people have. If Bigfoot was in a zoo and we're taking pictures of him at the camera, big deal. It's like the phenomenon's over. But this isn't over till we prove that, yeah, these things do exist. And my main goal is species and habitat protection is why I do Bigfooting mainly. I mean, I have the interest in it. It's a hobby, but actually more than a hobby. But, if you don't have the habitat, animals are going to disappear or become extinct, and so you got to have the habitat, the food, water, cover, and shelter for an animal to exist. And so I would like that to come to pass, where they would get, recognized as a species and, get protection. So,
Have you noticed any structures in the woods? I mean, you're out in the woods a lot, so you probably see a lot of natural things that happen out there as far as trees and structure. But have you seen anything that just couldn't be explained by natural means?
yeah, what I look for, if I see a teepee structure, I try to look for something that's been added to that teepee structure that's not within 50 feet of the treetops, or, you know, that type of tree. Like one time I had seen a red oak branch in like with cherry tree limbs, and I started looking for a red oak tree, and there wasn't nothing around. So I was thinking, how did that in that teepee structure? How did that red oak? But then there's deer hunters. Sometimes they can carry and make them teepee structures, but some of them I found have been in such thick. I think me and Mike and David found one here this summer that no deer hunter was going to set in it, because if you set back in that teepee structure and you're going to deer hunt, you got briars and brush, no shooting lanes. So that's not a place that something that a deer hunter made and would use. So we try to look for things that are interwoven, things that a deer hunter wouldn't use. Because if you see a teepee structure, it's either Bigfoot or it's a deer hunter, or it's natural. The limb just fell that way. And so you got to do the process of elimination. As far as arches, I mean, most of the structures I find, 99% of them, I can say it's natural. But there is a few that, you scratch your head. Yeah. How can limbs this big around get, 8 or 10 of them get entwined together and it just don't look like something, and as being a deer hunter might do, it's something I wouldn't set in, you don't have a shot, especially during bow season, and it just wouldn't be ideal at all. So then there's been some real little teepee structures. Me and David Wickham probably 5 years ago found like 7 or 8 of them on the top of a ridge, and they was only like 3 foot high, anywhere from 20 to 40 branches. I told David, I said, maybe it's the mother teaching these junior squatches how to build teepee structures, and I think they use them for like what do you call it? I can't think of the word, like their perimeter. Like, help me.
Boundaries, a
Yeah,
boundary of some
boundary.
sort.
Yeah, thank you. Their territories,
Mhm.
and that's the only like a mother bear teaches its cub. This is the food you eat. If you have danger, you run up a tree. So I mean, they was miniature. Unless there's miniature squatches, midget squatches running around, but what are they going to do in the woods if you got baby animals or little ones? They're going to play. And maybe that's the mother was teaching them how to build teepee structures. I don't know, but there were 7 or 8 of them on one ridge, and we walked the woods acres and acres, and nothing there, no other teepee structures, but on this one certain ridge. So that was sort of stood out to me over the years. So
That does seem a little unnatural. It doesn't seem like those would have happened in that one area naturally.
no, and what was odd about it, like me and David had walked around that whole circle, that area, and there was no other teepee structures, just in that. Oh, it was an area maybe smaller than a football field, so it wasn't a real big area for 20,000 acres of woodbury. It was just one ridge top there that had these. So it was intriguing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. A question I have back that incident that you had when you were young in the sandbox and this Bigfoot steps out from behind the old outhouse. That was pretty close to your yard, right?
yeah, that was in the backyard, and it was probably 50, 60 feet away from me and my sister. So it was a daylight up close sighting. Uh, that was the closest I've ever been to one, except for when we about hit it with a car. But yeah, that was, yeah, I still remember it vivid in my head today, the hair being, and I'm guessing at all this because, like I said, I was 9 or 10. But if I play it back in my mind, it was like more like a like 3 inches. It was like a real thick hair or fur almost. I don't know if I could classify it hair or fur, but it had a lot of it on it. And I remember the eyes. I can't remember, like, if I could go to my mind about the Patty film. I don't think it had as much hair. I can't tell for sure, but I don't think I'd have remembered that, where the Patty had all the hair, and I I don't remember all that. I just remember the eyes. They weren't red. Best I can remember, they was brown. I just remember it looking dead at us. I won't say it was an evil stare, like you get, but I just think it was curious or whatever. But uh, I don't know. It was,
What do you think it was doing that close to the house? I mean, curiosity is one answer, of course, for that, but that was really taking some chance to get that close in.
yeah. Only thing we could think that would draw it there, and I don't know how true this is. My aunt had, like I said, owned the property, and there was supposedly underground railroad tunnels back, for the slaves. And she actually had the entrance to it in the basement, and the door was all sealed shut. So whether there was, I can't verify that. True, that was something handed down from the family. My dad has told me. Uh, I don't know. I've never seen it, so that was just something. Why that creature would be drawn to that area is, I haven't a clue. It's grew up now. I mean, there's houses that's been shoot 40 some years ago, so it's a suburb now. But yeah, I don't know what would Woodbury. I can understand. There's 20,000 acres. Plenty of food sources. So you can get back off the beaten path where hardly ever anybody goes. Even the deer hunters. There's some spots that nobody really goes to, especially in the summer, because there's 150 ponds at Woodbury, and occasionally you'll see somebody dragging a canoe or fishing, but it's real rare that most of the time you don't run into anybody in the summer till deer
Did you,
season comes.
did you feel any fear from that experience at 9 or 10?
Yeah, yeah, we both ran. I mean, we both ran to the house, and then as I got into my teenage years, then I started hearing stories from my dad and my grandma, which she's passed away some time ago, about there being a big hairy monster that's like a Bigfoot creature running around the property. They've seen on occasion. My aunt and my grandma had both seen him, and at the same property. Through the years, the property sold now. She moved to Florida some time ago, but yeah, it was handed down, from the family, and so like I said, they never warned us kids that there was a big hairy monster that they had seen. It probably happened every couple years, so it was in the back of their mind. And we was playing in the sandbox. Best I can remember is maybe 40, 50 feet from the house, and another 50 feet to the outhouse where this thing come out from the wood line. So it was probably, there's so many reports of Bigfoots watching kids. They're sort of, they're not afraid. If kids are out playing, what are Bigfoots doing for entertainment? They're watching you at your campfires or watching your kids. So it was probably just curious, but the fear came from seeing something that a monster basically to us kids. So, we took off, but it was
Have you talked to your sister regarding that incident? How has she responded to it over the years?
yeah, pretty much the same way. It's been a couple years since probably 4 or 5 years since, maybe longer than that we've talked about it. But on occasion, at a Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas something, hey, you remember that Bigfoot? Yeah, I remember it plain as day. And we go over each other's details, and she's on my I've got a Facebook group called Woodbury, Ohio Bigfoot. She's on that, so she's checking stuff out that me and the guys are posting. Me and Mike's posting stuff, and there's a couple other friends that are. When we hike, we present the evidence. We necessarily don't say this is Bigfoot, but this is possible, Bigfoot evidence. So we put it out there.
Yeah, it's good to do that. So you haven't seen any of the orbs or craft or anything like that associated with any of this?
No, I've seen ball lightning one time, but as far as the orbs, I've never seen an orb. I've never portal. Everything I've ever seen through the years, tracks or the encounters I've had or the growls. I mean, we've had some things go on that this year was really epic with our outings that me and Mike was doing, and Robert and James, and it was really epic when I would go back through the Woodbury post that I had put on, and I said, I forgot that even happened. We had a really good year last year, but
What do you think is the best evidence that's out there right now to prove that Bigfoot exists? And I know that no one has to prove to you because you've had so many sightings.
yeah.
It's really obvious, but if we wanted to find something scientifically measurable, what do you think is the best evidence out there so far?
Well, it's coming down to it's going to have to take a body, unfortunately. I mean, DNA, when they do test the DNA, you know how it is. It comes back unknown species, and so you can get all the DNA in the world. You can get all the foot tracks, with dermal ridges. Uh, Dr. Meldrum, I think's got something like that. You can have the best vocals, that's if you get a video or a picture, just like the Patty film, as people's going to say you faked it or it was a hoax, or even people with credibility, because you got the armchair researchers that are the ones that, are skeptics anyway. And when you post something, there's so much hoaxing. That's the whole problem with the Bigfoot world. There's so many people wanting to make money and doing the hoaxing that you try to mix that with the truth, and it's muddied the water. The hoaxers have muddied the water for the real truth. Researchers are, trying to get the best possible proof. Now, there is some bands of small groups that are credible, that you can pretty much take their word as gold that this happened or that happened, but trying to put that with, the scientific world, until they open their eyes, or, nothing's going to happen until we actually get a skeleton or a body. And I just heard the other day that you need 3 bodies. So one wouldn't prove it. It would take 3. That way they can compare. So I don't know. Then there's the conspiracy of the government. If there is a body, the government, the men in black come in and take it. I don't know how true that is, but you think by now we'd have had a body, or a skeleton, and maybe we have, but maybe that has happened. I don't know.
Well, that's true, and you and I probably won't know until it's just general public knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess while we're in it, it's the adrenaline rush, the thrill, that we're doing something that, is beneficial. It's just like a lady I talked to yesterday about the dogman. She swore to her husband that they'd never talk about it. And this has been 12 years ago. And she called me and we talked for over an hour. She says, "Shame my husband passed away, but I wanted to get the story out there so it might help somebody or save somebody from getting hurt. So I wanted to get my story off my chest." So we talked over an hour about her dogman encounter, and she was really sincere with what she saw, and multiple times, and there was a big backstory to that. She would
Do
be
you feel
great for you.
do you feel comfortable telling me a little bit about it without revealing her name, of course?
Yeah, well, she was okay. She just, out of respect for her husband, she didn't want me to reveal her last name.
Sure.
And Janet, we'll call her Janet. And it's a really, really long story, but I'll try to make it short. They had always wanted a place out in the country, and it was by Oak Hill, Ohio. I think that it was. It's south of Toledo. Let me see if I got it wrote down here. Oak Harbor, Ohio. That was south of Toledo. And they always wanted a farm to have some chickens and ducks. And so they bought one. They said it was peaceful and quiet there for a few years. Then the neighbor, I guess he was wanting everybody out of there. He was just owned a bunch of land behind him. And he had took that ground that was fields and crops and dug it all up and turned it back into the swamp, which it originally was, because that's all the black swamp area south of Toledo. It all used to be 100,000 acres or more than that, actually, all swampland. We turned it back into swamp. And she said it was come right up to the back of her barn. There's a barn and a shed, actually, back to the back shed. She said that all grew up, into high cattails and weeds and swampy type land. And she said once that happened, then she started hearing loud, like barking growls. She said it was like a real deep pitched dog bark, but it had a growl to it. So I actually caught something sent something to her off YouTube about the dogman, growl, owl type thing. And she said, "Shane, that was it. That's what I heard." But she had heard this, her boy had heard it. And she said they burnt firewood for like 20 years that they lived at this place. And she said she would always, her husband would always keep it 6 foot high. That way, any higher than that, they was afraid it would fall on the kids. So they had went out there. Her and her husband had heard something out back by the backyard, and there was the firewood stack. And she said they seen big yellow eyes right behind it and sort of make out the outline. She said there was a pretty good moon out. So she could make out the outline that there was something a foot and a half higher over the firewood stack. So that would have put it 7.5 feet. She said it went down behind it, then ran off. They said they could hear it. She said it was moving so fast. She said it was just plowing right through, went right back into the swamp. They could hear it. She said it was heavy, whatever it was. But they had the little shed that backed up to the. I'm trying to get this right because I don't want to mess her story up. But they had a little shed back behind the barn that she said was on railroad tie foundation. She said that shed was packed full of junk. You know how it is. So you got a little shed, you're just going to pack it full of stuff, get out of the way. And she said they heard something hit that shed and ran outside. Well, I guess they got flashlights, or the next morning, I can't remember. It had knocked the shed off the foundation. Well, when they went to, put it back on, they noticed on the back side towards the swamp that there was a 4x6 hole, she said, that was like a burrow underneath the shed that had full of bones. So it was ever living back there. And she said none of this happened till the digging of the swamp started. And I told her, I said, I've been taking reports that, a lot of the Indian burial grounds is associated with dogmen. Why, I don't know. I'm not into dogmen. I do got my own Facebook site called Dogmen of Ohio. But I've always been on the fence about dogmen because I've never seen one. I've never seen a track. But a lot of these reports that I'm taking, people are really sincere. I mean, this woman said, Shane, I don't even go to the park with the grandkids if there's woods there. She said, I stay away from the woods. And she sold this place. I think it was 12 years ago, she said. So they moved out. She said it got so bad around the house, they was afraid that they just sold it and left. And her husband passed away. So anyway, one night she heard this growling and howling again. And her neighbor, I don't know how close he was on the sheriff's department. And he heard it too. And she heard a shot. So she ran over to the neighbor and said, Did you hit it? The officer said, no, I just shot to scare it. So I just shot in that general direction. And he said it took off. He said it was a wolf. He bunked it up. He wouldn't, probably within his position, he couldn't say, hey, it was a dogman. He just said it was just a big wolf. But what's a wolf doing in Ohio, right? So, and how can a wolf be standing up 7.5 feet tall? But anyway, she said that had just scared her so bad she stays out of the woods. She said she used to camp, fish, and she said she's in her 60s now. She said she quit doing all that. She said she just stays out of the woods. It had frightened her so bad. But there's a story behind that. Well, I'll get to it at the first part where the digging, this all started happening. Well, I was told by a real reliable source that when the Ohio Indians were buried, they would bury the chief separate from any of the tribe members. Then that warrior would be that the chief, before he was dead, would have a warrior picked out that would take care of his grave. Then after the warrior passed on so many years, his spirit would watch over the chief's grave. And that's where this dogman is sort of derived from. So I asked the lady, I said, is there any cemeteries by? I said, maybe this guy dug into a chief's burial ground. I don't know. It's so far out there. Bigfoot's so far out there. I don't know. I'm just taking reports from people. It ain't necessarily what I believe. I'm just listening to what people are saying, and they seem really sincere. So the other guy that I took the report, I said, is there any cemeteries? He said, yeah, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4. I said, well, maybe, I said, you can look through the library. Maybe it used to be an Indian burial cemetery. Then as the Indians mingled with the whites, I said, they wanted, once, half Indian, half white, once they died, maybe they wanted to be buried with their grandparents, which was the Indian burial ground. And it sort of merged together with the English and the Indians being buried together at some of these, you know, cemeteries. I don't know. I told him you could do the research on that and find out. But this lady said nothing happened until the neighbors started digging. And he was doing it for spite, just to run these. He said, I want all this land. She said she don't know what happened to them. They had sold, after all this was going on. But yeah, maybe he was the dogman. I don't know. I don't know. It's
Well, I have heard that as well, that dogman does tend to appear around cemeteries.
Oh, have you? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. They're associated with Indian burial grounds. So I don't know, if you can go off a ledge and believe in Bigfoot, then it ain't too far a step to believe in dogman. Or so I don't know. So I'm in the process of learning about the dogman thing and taking it all in. Like I said, I'm on the fence, but I'm more over to believing now than I was before. But I would love to see a track or see one. That way I could get all the way on board. Until I see a couple tracks or see one, then I'm just gonna, you know, be on the fence about it. But
It does seem like people are more accepting of a Bigfoot being a flesh and blood character in the woods, um, a real thing. And Dogman it's still just a little bit, on an iffy side for some reason. I don't know why those two are at odds with one another as far as the reality of their existence, but it does seem that way. I talk to people a lot that seem to have that same opinion.
yeah, it's a leap of faith. And I think maybe a lot of the Bigfoot reports, it's more people going out looking for Bigfoot, than there are dogmen. There ain't too many people going out dogman searching. If I will, I mean, if somebody tells me to stay out of these woods as a dogman, that's the first place I'm going. That's where I want to find evidence. But yeah, I think the more mainstreams with the Bigfoot, it's a lesser of a jump because you got the Patty film, you got Expedition Bigfoot, you got Finding Bigfoot, and you don't have that with the Dogman. You've got some podcast or YouTube things, taking reports, but you don't have the TV shows specifically looking for Dogman. So I think that's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think the TV appeal of that, with all the Bigfoot shows over the years, and even more, is why people are jumping onto the Bigfoot bandwagon. Yeah, we can believe it; it's on TV, but the Dogman's not. So it's we see it on TV or Facebook, so it's got to be true. How that is. So,
I think
but
Dogman also, we have this association with Dogman and werewolves, and that I think it's the way they look and just the mythology around the werewolf. That Dogman tends to kind of blur that, between those two things, and it becomes a less, uh, I guess, a little bit less of a reality in our minds.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, how you put that, I like that. Yeah, it is too, because like I said, it's a leap of faith to believe in Bigfoot, but to go that extra step with Dogman is, yeah, that's a lot bigger step. But I mean, until you see one, or maybe if I'd have heard something like that lady heard, then maybe I could be more of a believer in that. But yeah, once you see
Yeah.
a Bigfoot, and I know a guy that is really big in the Bigfoot world. He's got a really good name. Uh, I won't give his name, but he's like my mentor. I have a lot of respect for him, and he has never seen a Bigfoot. But he's one of the biggest Bigfooters out there as far as his heart. I'm talking heart. He don't care about his name; it's just his heart. And he's never seen one. And he said, "You know why I believe in him, Shane?" He said, "Because my wife has seen three, and I believe her." So, yeah, but
Well,
so
it's
that,
that personal testimony makes a lot of difference.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's casted some tracks, and he's been a speaker at some of the conferences. And but like I said, he's never seen one, but he knows they exist. So
Right. I understand that. I haven't seen one either, but I sure have interviewed a lot of people, and at this point in time, I would think it would be hard pressed to not believe them because there are so many authentic, real, genuine people that can't all be making this up.
No, no. I mean, you got your occasional goofballs out there, they seem to see a Bigfoot every time they go out. They find evidence, and that's impossible because I'm out a lot, and it's usually miles and miles and miles and briars before I find any maybe one possible track. Or we'll set up, and most of the nights it's just dead, or you get some coyote howls or something. Yeah, that might not be a coyote, but most of the time it's wildlife sounds. You don't get Bigfoot stuff, but when you do, it's awesome. It's just really, that's why we do what we do. It's just really exciting. And
Makes it all worthwhile.
yeah, it does. Except for that Mike guy. He likes pranking people. I mean, he uses the Bigfoot mask.
Well,
I'm
I know
kidding.
he's in the same room with you, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like pranking the guys. I keep them on the edge of their seat when we're out. We have fun. So if you can't have fun doing it while you're out there, and that's the
exactly.
biggest thing you can take at Bigfooting is get with the right people and have your fires, bring your food and drinks, and enjoy it. That's what you're going to remember. If you have good night with some possible Bigfoot action, that's a bonus. That's icing on the cake. But just go out there and have a good time. And we use night vision, thermals, audio recorders. We use pheromones, which is, we sort of got a list of what we use that helps and what we don't use that hurts. Like we put up imitation orbs. Like I said, I've never seen one. Have you seen an orb, Mike? No. Mike's never seen an orb, but we put them up because there's so many reports of people seeing Bigfoot and an orb. So we get the glow balloons and some fishing line, throw them up in the tree, and hang them. That way, a Bigfoot, if he's around, any distance, he'll see that hanging in the tree 20 feet high. And it hadn't hurt us because we've had some really good nights with it. So we can't say it drew them in, but it didn't hurt us. One thing we stay away from is the bright lights, the white flashlights. Because, if a Bigfoot's coming into camp, and you shine a million candle power on him, that's his safe place is the woods. He can come out, and the edge of the woods there and watch you at the camp. You can't see him. But if you put a bright light on him, you ruin that moment. So we use the green and the red lights, and plus it's easier on our eyes too. Especially if somebody's going like this, they shine it into your eyes. But we do that. We set up bait traps and set up, let me show you here. Oh, yes, I can put back. I want to show her. I got some in this bag I want to show you. There you go. Okay, these are sort of neat. These are called perimeter detectors. What they do, they're work on the basis of motion. Well, we set these up. It's got a little antenna there. You turn it on, and anything that breaks this beam, there's 5 of these. You just strap them to a tree. And here's your monitor. And they'll have a number on it, 1 through 5. And these will have a number on them, 1 through 5. So you set one up, say 100 feet to the east of where you're set up at. That's number 1. Then you go 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have a perimeter or a line, whatever you want. Then you just let something breaks that beam, then these numbers, that number will go off. Say number 1 goes off, it'll show up here. They go beep, beep, beep. So it's sort of, hey, you'll be talking in on the campfire and listening, all of a sudden, beep, 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 beep. So something's out there. It might be a deer, it might be an owl, but there's something out there. So that prepares you to get your night vision, your thermal ready, and say, hey, it's over here this way. Because by the time you get your night vision, you get it on, you get the IR settings, it's going to take 30 seconds. So go ahead and get it on. And if you catch a deer, that's great. And maybe it was an owl, or maybe it was Bigfoot. So we keep these up. which gives us a heads up if something's coming into, our area. So it's something that we invested in for the group.
Well, it sounds like a good idea. I may steal that from you and use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazon, I think they're like $210, something like that.
Not
And the
bad.
batteries last a long time, and yeah, they've been really good.
Yeah.
So, and you can
Well,
reset. You can reset them because they'll have the lights that go off. You can put it on silent mode where you don't hear the beep. It'll just have a flashing light, or you can have the beep. And once one would go off, or five, whatever number, it'll go off after a while. Then it'll just stay lit. That way you know it. But you can reset it. So yeah, they're pretty neat.
sounds
So
good. I'm going to go ahead and end our meeting today. Thank you so much, Shane, for joining me. I've learned a lot from you, and I think you've had some very interesting experiences.
well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me too. I appreciate it.